Hey everyone, I'm Tammy Sollenberger, the author of The One Inside, 30 Days to Your Authentic Self. This podcast is for anyone curious about who they are, the different parts of themselves, and for those who want to connect with their true self. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
So today on the One Inside podcast, we're doing something completely different. I'm very, very excited. So as you know, Joan Ryan and I have written a chapter in the Altogether Us book on the Enneagram and IFS. And so since I'm interviewing all the authors from the Altogether Us project, Joan and I were just going to get on the podcast and just chat again, which I think this would be our 6th time on the podcast chatting. Is that right, Joan?
No, it would be 8.
Oh my gosh. Okay, 8.
This would be number 8. Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, we could do that. And then Jenna said, I think someone had said something to, I think Daphne actually had said to Jenna, well, who's going to interview Tammy? And so Jenna said, well, maybe I will. And I said, yes, I love that. So today, Jenna Riemersma is here, and she is going to interview Joan and I about our chapter. And we're going to see if I can let my parts settle back and be interviewed without asking Jenna questions or Joan questions, which when I've been on other podcasts, I sometimes tend to jump in and ask them questions. So Jenna, I'm going to hand the host mic over to you, and then let's see what happens today.
I love it. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the One Inside podcast. I'm Jenna Riemersma, your guest host, and I have the amazing opportunity to be here with Tammy and Joan. And how about if we start the way Tammy often does, which is to say, if you were looking out your window, what would you see and where are you located in the world?
Okay, well, I can start. I am looking out my window and into my favorite tree, which is an enormous tree that shades my deck, which looks out over the Charles River in Boston. And the leaves have come out. So last week was my favorite week of the year when the leaves pop. That's the best day. And now they're out. Walking my dog just a little while ago, we came across a very large wild turkey who was about 3 times the size of my dog. So that was what I saw today. We did not allow playing with the turkey. That would not have been good.
No turkey playing. Okay, we got it.
Tam?
I love it. Yeah. So I'm also on the river, but I'm not on the Charles River. I'm on the Cocheco River, which is a tiny river in Dover. And when I look out, I actually see my hammock because I put out my hammock the other day and it's finally beautiful. So it's like 70 plus degrees outside. And yesterday was Mother's Day, and Eris and I, that's my son's name. The boy and I sat on the hammock for a little while. It was beautiful. So that's what I see.
Oh man,
and I'm in Dover, New Hampshire. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I'm not on a river. I am in Atlanta, Georgia, on unceded Cherokee land. And when I look out my window, I actually see my backyard because I am now working from home and not from my office, which is a change. But I'm having fond memories because Joan, I used to go running along the Charles River when I lived in Boston for graduate school. And so I have this image in my mind of the crew teams out on the river at early in the morning and the mist rising, and I'm transported back in time. So I love it. Yeah. Well, it's so fun to have you both here and to be on this side of the microphone. And I want to know how the two of you met and got interested in this intersection of internal family systems and the Enneagram.
Tammy, you want to start that?
Sure. So I had a couple clients, I had one client go to an Enneagram conference and talk to me about it. And then maybe months later, I was at Thanksgiving in Maryland and just sort of noticing family dynamics and how different people did different things. And then on the way home, back driving up here, I was on Instagram and just saw one of those posts that were like, here are the 9 types of the Enneagram. And at Thanksgiving, here's how all the types would be doing something different or feel something different or would have prepared for Thanksgiving in a different way. And I was like, that it just blew my mind because I was like, that makes so much sense. And so I did in the car, in the traffic, I did like a type inventory, found out I was a 3. And then I don't really remember what happened after that. I just started really getting into it. And then it might have even been a year or 2 later, I wanted to get somebody on the podcast that knew about the Enneagram. And Joan had sent out an email to this listserv that I'm a part of about the Enneagram. And I was like, ooh, a person who's into the Enneagram. And so I emailed her. And then I had actually just gotten my dog. Do you remember this, Joan? I was sitting outside a coffee shop with my little corgi acting like a nut that she is. And Joan and I had a conversation.
It was literally out of the blue. This woman calls me and we set up this call, and 3 that she is, Tammy was doing 15 things at once. She was in the car, out of the car, taking the dog, putting the dog back. And I'm just laughing watching this because I've been doing Enneagram work for a very long time, and did IFS level 1 training, I don't know, 12 years ago, something like that, and have been playing around with it, but not to the extent of having somebody really versed to work with all the time. And we did our first conversation and it was just like we clicked. She's a 3, I'm a 9. We can play the shared line, but it's just a really good partnership. And I think it was just this enormous gift that we got. So we started playing with what we could do and did some beginning groups to explore. And as we did that, we found our rhythm as co-teachers. And the rest is history. That's what, 3.5 years ago, something. And then when Jenna came with this wonderful idea of a book, of course, my 9 parts got really upset. What do you mean I have to sit and write this all down? But we put it together, and with Jenna's help and the editing and everything else, we came out with something that I'm just really proud of. And I'm really honored to be in the company of the 30 women and men who are contributing to this project. Because I think it's very important for the IFS community. And I'm learning from the other authors all the time.
Yeah, it's really been an incredible honor to have all of this vast wealth of collective wisdom in each of these chapters. And I've really benefited as the editor, but have just loved what the 2 of you have done with IFS and the Enneagram. And I'm just wondering, Joan, if your 9 was able to help Tammy not text and drive, because what I'm hearing is Tammy was taking the Enneagram test while she was driving. I don't know if I'm tracking with you there, but it sounds.
I think you got that right. I don't know if it was my 9ness, but it was definitely my mama bear.
Oh, excellent.
Which, yeah, one of my daughters is an 8, so I have a fair amount of experience with this. But
I've never texted Jenna and driven. No, never.
No texting and driving.
Marco, yes. Texting, no.
Oh, good.
That's
okay.
Fantastic. I love it.
Okay. So
I think we should ask Jenna what we know what she is, but we want to ask our host what type true. She is.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I have type insecurity. Is that a thing? I'm going to make that.
Oh, definitely a thing. Yeah.
I'm coining that. So I test as sometimes it depends, as a 1, but I think I have a lot of 3 and also 2. And what I want to be is a 7. So I'm all over the place. Like I did this Enneagram, or I don't know, a type. No, it wasn't Enneagram. It was the dog. Like they had you know, that one it's 4 different animals. And so they had us all take the test and then go in the corner of the room that was our personality type. And mine was like, it was me and all of the accountants. Oh. And we all said our name and then stood there quietly waiting for our instructions. And the golden retrievers were in the corner just laughing and hooting and hollering. And I was like, I want to be one of those.
Okay, well, I'll give you a couple hints here. The first thing, as Tammy has heard me say umpteen million times is none of the tests are reliable, including the one that I created myself. And that is because in any given moment, different parts are up and different parts are quiet. Some of us know ourselves better than others, and sometimes that's situationally dependent. What I think that all of the tests are good for is to give you a starting point. And what you're saying, Jenna, is something really familiar to me. And it's that you're exploring and you can find pieces of 1 and pieces of 3 and pieces of 2, and you float between them. And the way I learned it, I'm trained in what's called narrative tradition Enneagram, which is interviewing. Or as my teacher, Helen Palmer says, the types speaking for themselves. So what that means is I can be, this big deal expert, which I sort of am, but your experience internally of how the type works in you through your parts is what really governs. So when we teach our classes, we do a lot of that. I will never tell somebody that they're not the type that they think they are, even if I'm sure they're not, because it doesn't help them. It's just not useful. We had a really interesting situation with this a couple of years ago. We had a woman in the class who had identified as a type. It was real clear to me that she was in the wrong quadrant, but she needed to be there, and you have to respect people where they are. And we went on for more than a year. And all of a sudden, one class, she said to me, "You don't think I'm a type this, do you?" And I said, "Well, it's not really up to me." She said, "Well, I want to know what you see." "Well, if you ask me that way, I'll tell you." "Well, I see aspects of this and this, and this is why." And about 2 weeks later, she came back and she said, like the whole world opened up, because she went into it on her own, talked to her parts about it, and came back solid in where she was. And that's with everybody we've got. So it's like that.
Yeah. And that feels so beautiful too, as an intersection to the idea of being a constellation of many different parts, that sometimes one part is more dominant than others, and it varies contextually and with our own inner work and all of that. And you two really explicate that beautifully in the chapter. And what I'm hearing you say, and similar to what Tammy was saying about Thanksgiving and the Enneagram post on social media, is that in these different circumstances, different types may engage with the same circumstance very differently, and they'll bring typically a part or a cluster of parts to that experience. Can you say more about that? Am I tracking with you right on that?
No, you've got it. Tammy came up with this, which I really love, which is the idea that everybody's been to a kid's birthday party at some point. And I don't remember where you found it, but
because I experienced it, because I was pissed off at the guy not helping clean up the trash at the birthday party. So why is this guy not helping clean up? I'm helping clean up. All these other people are helping clean up. This guy's not helping clean up, and I was pissed off. That's what happened.
Well, and that's the source material, and I just love it. So anyway, one of the things that you started to say with us, Jenna, and this is correct, is that the hypothesis that we came up with and that we work with is that Enneagram type is really in each person a constellation of parts. And I just love the word constellation. It's the only one that really speaks to this. And if I have 3 different people who are 3, using Tammy as an example, those parts are going to be quite similar in that one grouping. Everybody's going to have other parts, life experience, trauma, age, whatever. But there have to be certain parts that make up the structure of the type. And there are also going to be similar exiles with similar issues, let's put it that way, because the fact patterns are going to be different, but the issues that they focus on tend to be very much the same. And what appears to us after 3.5 years of this is that there are just some parts that have to be in there because they're holding the type structure together. So similar to what Dick says about IFS, no bad parts, you never want to get rid of a part. You don't want to take away any of those parts that are holding the Enneagram type, but you do want to soften them and make relationship with them. And that's kind of where the word I've been playing with lately is complement. That's where IFS and the Enneagram really complements each other, because we can look at the parts that we can find and see the pattern of the Enneagram type, or we can look at the Enneagram type structure as we know it, and then go look for the parts. And it works in either direction, if that makes sense. So if I go back to the birthday party, Tammy, and if I use you as a 3 as the example, you're at the birthday party cleaning up. And what do you know about why?
So I'm going to back up for a second and just sort of set the stage for the birthday party idea. So the idea is there's 9 types in the Enneagram. And if we all, let's say there's 9 types and we all go to a party and we're all a different type, we're going to be doing certain things, and we might be doing some of the same things. Like we might be all cleaning up, or some of us won't be cleaning up, but we're going to be doing them for different reasons. We talk about different drivers. Like there's going to be sort of a different driver, different parts driving us. So there'll be people not cleaning up, people cleaning up, people doing all different types of things, but we're doing them for all different types of reasons. And so that's kind of the idea. So I'm going to put my host hat on for a second. So if you're listening, I want you to imagine if you're at a kid's birthday party, thank you, Jenna handed me her hat. Like, just imagine, what are you doing? Are you even going? Are you like, there's no way I'm going to a kid's birthday party. I'm going to get somebody else to take my kid. So that tells you something, not only about your parts, but about your Enneagram type. So we're going to sort of make it broader and say, okay, let's just look at your broader type. So that's going to tell you something about your type. Like there's no way you're going to a birthday party. Okay, that informs us about your type. So we just think about it, if you go to a kid's birthday party, how are you going to feel going? What are you going to look like? What are you going to do? What are you going to do when you get there? Who are you going to be? How are you going to present? How are you going to present when you go to this party? So I want you to kind of hold that in your mind while we're talking. So if I'm going to go to the party, I'm a 3. So I'm going to make sure that I look cute. It's going to be I'm going to try to have a cute outfit on. That's going to be something that's important to me. I have other parts that don't like that and think that's ridiculous. So I'm going to notice that, but I'm going to look cute. I'm probably going to be super friendly. I'm going to work the room. I'm going to talk to everybody. I'm going to make sure my kid's okay, which he's fine. He'll be fine. But I'm always going to have an eye on him, but he's, a single child. So he's good. So he's good going around doing his thing. But yeah, I'm going to work the room. I'm going to talk to lots of people. I'm definitely going to be like, what can I do to help? I'll help serve the cake. I'll help throw things away. I'm going to be busy. And I'm going to be pretty involved in.
And what kinds of things would upset you, just to extend this metaphor?
Well, someone not helping. Apparently that really upsets me. If, this again is super embarrassing, but if I don't feel good in my body, or if I feel like I don't look good, that will make me not as confident and not as friendly and not as outgoing. And I'll get shy and I say weird. I get really weird. These are parts I do not like.
I'll say to the rest of you that even though she's going to feel weird, you'll never know. So if I take that and run it with what we're doing, Enneagram to IFS, IFS to Enneagram, what Tammy's telling us is that she has some parts that are really concerned with what I would call, from an Enneagram standpoint, image, how she is seen and received by the other people. And she's aware of it. And she's also aware that she has something to do with crafting it, for lack of a better word. Now that's really interesting, because that right off the bat tells me if there's high priority on that particular piece, image, and an awareness around it, that makes me start to look at the triad of type 2, type 3, and type 4, which we call the heart triad or the emotional triad, because those are the people, and keep in mind, all of these are universals, but the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s of the world are the people who have the most connection to, and there's the most juice around how they're perceived, both physically and otherwise, by people around them, and in 3 different ways. But the key here is how important that image is to them. So if Tammy were a client and coming to me with that in the birthday party situation, I'm going to start digging into what is going on about image and what parts are there. And she's given us great examples of it. But that's kind of how this works. If we go to me, which is a 9, which is a different triad, 8, 9, and 1 are body types. I couldn't do image to save my life. I mean, we were laughing the other day because I had to have photographs taken, and, it took 3 people to get me to relax. And, it just isn't my thing. It should be. I have critics about it, but it isn't. But it is for her. So if it's me at that birthday party, I'm going to be looking around from my 9 perspective, trying to see, is everybody comfortable? Is everybody sort of getting along? Is there anybody who seems really distressed? Because in my 9 world, it would be my job to go and try to fix that if I could, unless I was too scared. But my interest is going to be in that harmony in this space. So that's the 9 view screen. So instead of image, I'm looking for, are people getting along? And if I step one step deeper into that, it's really about who's controlling the situation, and are they trying to control me? And what we know is that if you happen to be an 8, a 9, or a 1 on the Enneagram, that's of primary importance to you. We don't actually care about controlling other people most of the time, with a few exceptions here and there, children beware. But we do care that nobody is controlling us. And usually we also care that nobody is being inappropriate in trying to control someone else, because our sensors are going to meet that the way Tammy's image sensors are going to pick up how everybody looks and whether they're appropriately, doing their part to make this party go, something like that. So that's how, again, I can go from my type parts, or I could go from the parts that come up, because almost instantly, if I walk into a birthday party or any situation like that, I'm going to know what it feels like in the room. Is there tension? Is there conflict? Is there what? And then I can track back to my parts from them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is these triads, the different triads in the Enneagram, have a similar focus or a similar area of concern that they're going to attenuate to. And that then within that, each of the types has a cluster of fairly similar parts that would show up in a different way. Is that right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And one of the ways that you'll often hear is that there are similar concerns. They're not necessarily behaviors. And like IFS, parts can cause any kind of behavior. Type can cause any kind of behavior, but it's not necessarily true that another 9 is going to behave like me. It is that the drivers are the same. The other 3s aren't necessarily going to behave like Tammy, but the drivers inside are the same. So just to fill this out, the 3rd triad is 5, 6, and 7, which we usually call the head triad or the mental triad. So you have heart, 2, 3, 4, God or body, 8, 9, 1, and 5, 6, 7. And these are the people who are going to be most attuned to, are things going right? How comfortable are they? Not from the harmony standpoint like a 9, but from the I don't see any reasons for anxiety standpoint. And I'm overgeneralizing a little bit, because sometimes 7s, which is one of these 3 types, won't quite see it that way. But there's usually something about anxiety, whether it shows or not. And there's something about being prepared for whatever could happen. In the 5 and 6, it's going to be what could happen that could be bad. In the 7, it's going to be what could happen that could be good, but it's what could happen and how can we be prepared for it. So again, it's just one picture of it, but I would expect in the birthday party that the 7 is going to be the one on the floor playing with the kids, getting into trouble. I had a 7 friend when one of my daughters was little who thought that it was wonderful to sit at the top of the stairs and throw, wooden bricks, at the front door. They had a great time. I wasn't amused. So he's going to be playing. or is going to be involved in something else that is in the future and is going to be checked out to it. Our observer fives, who usually are very quiet, very often are really, really happy around small children. Not always, but often. So they may be involved in showing a kid how to do something or how to play with something, or, what's that new toy that's up, especially if it's a puzzle. Their attention might go there because that's their strength. And it also gives them a focus so that they feel protected from the rest of the people. And the sixes are always very different one from the other. It's just the structure of the type. So I can't really tell you what they'd be doing, but they'll know if anything's going to go wrong.
Yeah, I love that. So within each of these focuses, each of these areas of concern, even within the numbers, they may really vary in terms of how it manifests, both for the type, as well as for individuals within the type, because there's uniquenesses, of course, among individuals, if I'm tracking with you.
Exactly right. And as Tammy always says, which part happens to be driving the bus at the moment? We can kind of make guesses about what it is. So again, if I run the rest of the metaphor, if I go back to 2, 3, and 4, the threes are going to be doing something, because that's what threes do. They're aware of image, but they're doing something, usually something productive. It's just their view screen. The twos are going to be doing something that they see as being helpful. Again, in their view screen, we may not agree with them, but in their screen, they're helping. And the fours usually are doing whatever it is to demonstrate their specialness and their uniqueness. So they could be organizing a dramatic reading among the children, or, doing something really creative and really fun in artwork or something like that. But it'll be to be different. And that's the way they interact. And then going back up to the top, the nines will be making sure that everybody's comfortable. And once they know that, using myself as an example, they will be in the background cleaning up or doing something so that they don't have to be in the face of any arguments. My example is at family parties, I was always in the kitchen washing the dishes because it got me away from the dinner table where everyone was yelling at each other. So that was my self-protective nineness. The ones will be sticking to the script, making sure that everything's going along orderly. If they're, let's say, in a place where there's a time limit, they're going to be the ones that are going to be aware of it because it's a rule and those kinds of things. But they also can be really creative and really fun and really good with little kids. And the eights of the world are just going to make sure that everything is moving forward and that everything is under control. Not from the perspective that anybody could get hurt or any of that, but just to make sure that everything that needs to be done is getting done and that there's no chaos.
Yeah. Well, Joan, I love how you mentioned this. I'm going to sprinkle in an IFS word into what you said, but a part of you learned how to keep you safe from the arguing at the dinner table when you were young by developing the strategy of being in the kitchen, washing the dishes. And as we're looking at this sort of interaction between the Enneagram and IFS, there are these common clusters of parts within each type. And I'm curious if you picked maybe 1 or 2 parts from this party and talked about what are the common clusters of parts, and are they burdened necessarily, unburdened? Like, what is the what's the dynamic there?
I think they could be either. Tammy, you want to take a stab at this?
And so one of the things that we talk about is, let's say unburden for now, because so let's hold off on that idea. But I think what we say is you actually can really map. So what I love about the Enneagram is I can actually say, okay, if I know, like I have a client who's an 8, I really have an idea of who are the major drivers or sort of players in her system. I already kind of know what her map is going to look like. Like I already know who those major players are going to be. There's a lot of stuff I don't know and I'll be curious about, but I know that like being understood is super important to her. I could care less if you understand me at all. That is not, I could care less, but I care very much about being seen and being seen correctly. she could care less about being seen. So if I was to say to her, my 8, this is not answering your question, but I just know that about sort of how my type structure and sort of those things, the parts that make up a 3 that are really important and that I can see in my map of my system are going to look similar to other 3s. So if I was working with an 8 and I was like, yes, it's really important for you to be seen, that's not going to land on her, right? That it's no for her, it's to be understood. And as a therapist, I really hold that. I know that. So I know when we're talking that I could use that language for her, because that's a lot of her exiles are going to be around. So a lot of her exiles are going to be, I was not understood. And then a lot of her protectors are going to be there helping her, demanding being understood, like helping her when she's not, firefighters, helping her when she's not understood, anger when she's not understood. Does that make sense? And so we could do that for every single one of the types. We really it's almost like you have an automatic transparency screen over who, like, I already know what your parts are some of them are and they're going to be your major players, right? So if my client who's an 8, or let's say my client who's a 4 says something, she's talking about her relationships that aren't going well, and she says something about, wanting to feel special. I know that she's a type 4. And so I know that that's not something I'm just going to blow over. I'm going to be, okay, so there's a part here that really wants to feel special. Like there's going to be a lot of exile energy around feeling special. And there's going to be there's going to be a lot of protectors that want to make sure that she is seen as special. And then firefighters that come in when she doesn't. And we could do that for all of them.
Exactly. It's exactly right. And what the one piece that I would add to it is, I think we've started to see that these main characteristics of type are always going to be what Dick would call a trailhead. They have to be in there. And the other thing I want to add to what Tammy said is to step one step back before that client comes in and you know what type they are. The thing that's cool about putting these systems together is that you don't have to know what they are at the beginning. You can ask enough questions to find the parts that are the drivers. And if you know what the map of the types are, you can make a really good guess. And I love this part, you don't have to be right, because if you're not, the client will give you the feedback to tell you, because the part won't be there.
Well, and that's the same in IFS, right?
Yeah.
We're curious. We don't have to be right. We can make some guesses with some curiosity. So there are a lot of, it's very similar, like obviously, but that's sort of the idea, is that, we have a lot of curiosity and we hold this. I think of the Enneagram as sort of a loose, because I'm IFS first. And so I hold the Enneagram loosely, like when we'll talk about this too, but sort of like, okay, I know that this is a type, an 8 or 3 or a 4 or a 6 or whatever that I'm working with. And so I can hold that loosely as I'm helping their self get to know their parts. I'm holding this loosely, that I know their type. And so I know who the major player is going to be. And I know what the exiles are going to sound like, feel like, their experience is going to be like. I hold that loosely as I'm working with them and helping them get to know their parts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'm hearing that the parts really hold the type structure together.
Yeah.
And you're hearing that when a client comes in the room, and whether you're hearing it through the IFS lens or through the Enneagram lens, those dominant parts, the dominant areas of focus for the type are going to be the ones that are going to be primarily speaking and holding a lot of the burdened energy, if I'm following. And so would it be fair then to say that when we have more access to self energy, and self has been with the parts more consistently, has been unburdening parts, that an expansiveness occurs that broadens the reach to some other types? How would you illustrate that?
Yes. And I'll step back one step. One of the things that I love about all of this, and I think Tammy agrees, is that there's a similarity between self energy, as beautifully described in IFS, and the ideas that I learned in the Enneagram, which is that you want to loosen the hold that the automatic type patterns have on you, so that by making space, the higher or more positive qualities which are embedded in the types can come through. And the thing that's particularly interesting is that both of those things only can happen, and my language would be on the receptive. You can't reach for self-energy, but you can make space for self-energy to come. You can't reach for the higher qualities of your type, but you can make space for it to come. And that similarity is really very valuable, I think, because the unblending and unburdening that we do continually softens the automatic, the Enneagram could be described as automatic unconscious thinking, feeling, and acting patterns. That's one definition. And by unblending and unburdening, we're loosening that. Tammy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the thing that is really cool is that I am not those parts. Like, I am not the parts that need to have this image, or I'm not the parts that need to do. Like, yeah, but so what happens, just like when we first start doing IFS, I think the same thing happens with the Enneagram. Like, oh, that's not me. Like, that's not me. Like, those are the major parts of me, and there's a lot of that. That's not who I am. And so that's the first really cool shift that happens. It's like, you're not perfectionism, or you're not like needing to be special, or you're not an anxious mess as the sixes are. I get to say that. That's not who you are, right? So that's the thing that's so beautiful. And when IFS brings that truth of our authentic self, it's like, that's not who I am. Those are my parts. They might be my major parts, and they might be, there's lots of burdens, but even unburdened, that is still important to me. And there's still, as much unburdening as I've done, I'm still very aware that that's something that's true about me. And Joan, I think you can speak to this, but it's something that's true about me, whether burdened or unburdened. It might be driving me different. The exiles, this is what I think it is. I think it's the energy around it is driven. If needing to be seen is driven by a younger part of me, an exile who is alone and feels abandoned, that is a different energy than me needing to be seen at a birthday party driven by this little sweet exile is very different than me being like, I want to look cute today. That's very different. Both focused on image. One is not coming from a burdened place.
No, it's beautifully said, Tammy, and I love that, because what you're speaking to is, again, what both systems bring to people, and that is more flexibility and more insight into who they actually are, not just the parts that are driving them. And I mean, if you take the example of somebody who has a lot of trauma overlay, I'm sure you've seen it, I've seen it. You get people who are so identified with that trauma that they think that's who they are. And IFS, through gently and slowly unblending and unburdening those, can then release some of that, so they see, oh no, it's not all of who I am. And the type works the same way. I did want to circle back to something that Jenna asked before. When you look at the two systems together, it kind of would line up nicely if you could take the higher qualities of the Enneagram in the types and the 8 Cs, or the key components of in IFS. And what we found is that it doesn't. There are some IFS identified qualities of self which are more likely to appear more often in certain types, but there's no direct correlation. So any C could show up in any type. The way that I understand the Enneagram higher qualities is that as you relax your type and that positive quality energy can come in, that's your doorway to all of the higher qualities. You go up through that, and that's an access point. So you're not moving type to type, but you are, as you do your own work and unburden and unblend and self-energy flows in, making space for the higher qualities, which are things like honesty and equanimity and serenity and so forth. There is some material out there that says that as your awareness gets better in the Enneagram community, as your awareness gets better, you move towards one of your connected points. And as you get less healthy, you move towards it. Situationally, maybe. As a growth path, absolutely not. I've been, my view only, but I've been doing this a really long time. And one of the things that is persuasive to me is, can I verify a claim that I read in a book with actual people who are that type? And I can't verify any of that. I also was taught by Dr. David Daniels, who was one of my mentors, that the Enneagram is really best used for basically normal, reasonably functioning people, that it is not useful in a situation where there's severe trauma, let's say, or there's some kind of mental impairment or any kind. It's just not reliable. So from that perspective, we don't want to overlay any of these type structures on those situations. It just doesn't work. Yes.
The other cool thing though about that is, yeah, like I don't become a 9 or a 6, like I become a healthier 3. Like I become like I have or in IFS language, I have a different relationship. I have a friendship with those parts of me. Like I have more of a friendship with those parts of me. But I think this is the other way you can map your system is, and I know we're not talking about this a lot, but like, if I look at my wings, I look at my connected points, I can actually really see, oh, I have a part that's really like a 9 that numbs me out, that distracts me, that keeps me dissociated sometimes. Like I can really look at my connected point and I can see some parts, and I can really look at one of my wings. Like I have the 2 wing and I have a lot of helping parts. Okay, so I can use the Enneagram map to map my parts, because I can see my type, my wings, and my connected points, and I can really see which characteristics or qualities of those types line up with my parts. And it's not going to be the same for everybody. Like all 3s aren't going to have those same parts, but similar. We're going to grab some from 9, some 3, some 2, 4, and 6. It's interesting.
It's absolutely true. And the thing that's you just said so nicely, and we got to capture this because I think that this is a new edge, is that it's a very dynamic system. So, if you read an Enneagram book, it says you have a stress point and a heart point and 2 wings, or 1. Some people even say you only have 1. Well, you have 2. But what we do know is that all of those connections have to be in there somewhere. So there's some more trailheads to look at. If I identify as a 9, there has to be somewhere in me, positive or negative, or probably both, some 3 and some 6, because those are my connected points. And there has to be, to a lesser extent, some of those wings, in my case, an 8 and a 1. So it's a map to go looking. And let's say we have a client who we know is a particular type and they're really, really stuck. That may be a way for us to go look. Let's go look for the connected point. But it is dynamic and it is holistic in the same way that IFS is that all of the parts and all of the exiles and everybody inside there has a function and is trying to keep everything moving forward, good intention and all of that.
Well, the synergy between these 2 models really strikes me as the synergy between the 2 of you, and I love it so much. And I know that all of the listeners are going to want more and more of the 2 of you. What, in addition to Altogether Us and your amazing chapter in this book, what other offerings do you have coming up? What are some ways that listeners can really drop deeper into this content with you both?
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, so we, I think 3 years ago, I think we started running IFS and Enneagram groups, and we've done, I don't know, I'm not good with numbers. We've done a bunch of them. So we will run a new Enneagram and IFS, just a group, just a basic group online in the fall. But probably, and we haven't figured this out yet, but in the summer, we're going to do like either maybe an hour to probably not an hour, because we won't be able to do it in an hour. We can't even talk on this thing for an hour. We'll probably do 2 hours or a half day workshop we're going to do an intro, like a super basic intro to Enneagram and IFS. And then we're going to do what are we calling it? Like a go deeper for people that have already done our workshops. So we think we've done maybe 6 of them. And so the people that have already done the workshops, if they're interested, which they always tell us they're interested in wanting to go deeper and sort of do more, we're going to do another like half day sort of thing. So sometime this summer, we're going to run 2 of those. So if you want to get more information, you could go to either one of us. You can go to our websites and get on our email lists and then find out that way. And someone actually emailed me the other day and like, oh, can you email me when this happens? I'm like, what? No. No, I cannot email you personally when such and such happens. I want to do all of that, but I just can't. So no, get on my email list, follow me on Instagram. I'll tell you that way.
Let me add just a tiny bit to that. The intro would be a really great way for somebody to spend a couple hours with us over the summer and see what this is about and if it feels right. The one for existing students or past students may very well drive the what will become the topics for a more advanced class in the fall. We're considering doing that, but the way we like to work is to have our students tell us what they're interested in and which directions they want to go, because there's so many possibilities. So if you're interested in that, that would be a way to do it. That more advanced class would also be open to somebody who has pretty good IFS understanding and pretty good Enneagram understanding. The one proviso that we've learned is that we can't have somebody in one of those more advanced classes who really doesn't know the basics, because it bleeds off the energy and the other people lose too much of us backing up. So that's the only piece of that. You don't necessarily have to have worked with us before.
Well, in our intro class, what we ended up deciding was Joan has these amazing type cards, and you kind of hear this in Joan that like every type has different words they say, different things that are important to them. And so she has these amazing type cards that makes it so clear. And so before you can do our intro class, you have to get those type cards so that you really have a good sense of what your type is, and you have to get my book. So then you have to have a little bit of an IFS sense. Like, so, we've had people that have struggled with sort of wanting us to sort of teach them a little bit more about IFS. And so, we will do some of that, but you have to have a somewhat sense of IFS.
And the thing that's wonderful about Tammy's book is that she has really accessible definitions of all of the key terms that we're using and all of the sort of key parameters that you need to know as new to IFS in a way that you can practice them. And it took us a while to learn that that's what we really needed to do. But it made a huge difference this last round because they came in on the same page, and it helped a lot. We don't require that you know your type, but it's a good idea that you have some idea of where it might be, because it'll come out in the work that we do over time. There also may be some other workshops coming. I'm going to do some work present some work at the International Enneagram Conference in San Francisco in July. So Enneagram people, that's an opportunity. We just keep rolling forward. And it's endlessly fascinating, because every time we have a new person, we learn something new about their type, their structure, and their parts. And that adds to the overall maps that we're creating.
I love it. I love it. This is fantastic. You two are just a powerhouse duo, and I know everyone is going to want to be in all the things, all the classes. I also just want to point out you have a wonderful Going Deeper appendix to your chapter for people who may be interested in dropping in deeper in a variety of ways, and that's got links for podcasts, books, resources, type cards, all the things. Every chapter in the book has that, but people who are interested, there's just a wealth of information on Enneagram and IFS in your Going Deeper section as well. So it's so exciting. I could just hang out and talk to you guys forever. Actually, I will be. Tammy and I are going to Kripalu in Massachusetts tomorrow for my birthday. So I will hang out and talk to you more about this.
Happy birthday, Jenna. And Tammy, you have type cards there. Bring a set and give them to Jenna, and I'll give you another set. Then I won't have to mail her one. So
I'm writing it down.
Love it.
Yes, writing that down.
Play with them. And if you
Thank
want more,
you.
just let me know. The type cards came out of my frustration of doing either a typing interview or an introductory class and not having something that somebody could take away and play with. I didn't actually want them to have a book. There's plenty of good Enneagram books out, and we listed some in our Going Deeper, but I wanted them to have something that was more dynamic. So there is a card sorting exercise, and then there are summary cards for each type that have not everything about the type, obviously. None of this is intended to be comprehensive, but enough that you can begin to see the patterns. So that's how.
Well, what I need to know is if I do the type cards, will it make me a 7?
No.
This is my goal.
Okay, so
can I add 3, 2, and 1 and get 7?
Here's the thing. If in fact you are a 1, like I said before, 7 is in there. And the more that we can relax the 1, the more the positive sides of 7 can shine through. Now, there are some negative sides of 7, even though it doesn't look like it on the face of it. And we don't want those to come through, but they could just as easily. But it's a goal. We're not going to turn you into 1, but we can get you part of the way there. We used to call it a trap door in a 1. Was the
trap door. Oh dear, this sounds really frightening. But if it ends me up at a 7 in a party, I'm good. I'm loving it.
You'll be good. And yeah, we can do that. One of the things that I do with the cards is I do typing interviews virtually. If somebody wants to really go deeper one-to-one. So
I also would say Jenna could get to know the part of her that wants to be.
That really wants to be said.
Yeah, I really am curious about this part of you, Jenna. I'm going to be in the car with you for 3 hours tomorrow. We're going to talk about this part of you that wants to be.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up, Joan and Tammy, let me just ask you, if you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you rather be doing instead? No, that's the IFS question. That's not the one inside question.
Yeah, that's it though. Yeah,
it's very similar.
I'm asking in my protected parts, if they didn't have this job, what would they like to do?
What would they rather do? If you weren't doing what you're doing now, is there anything else that you would like to do?
It's a very hard question because it took me a long time to find what I did love to do, which is very nice. And that involved a very, very dramatic career shift a long time ago. And this is just so much fun and so interesting, and being able to put this out and see it grow. There's not much better than that. I also do like to play with my garden and my kids and all that stuff. But in terms of work, this is about as good as it gets.
I love that. And Tammy, how about you? If you weren't doing the 487 things while you were driving, what would you be doing?
Yes, I would be at the beach, and I would be selling books, doing something with books in the beach. That's what I would be doing.
Yeah,
I love it. And ice cream? Is there ice cream in that? Ice cream, books, and beach?
Yeah, ice cream. Yeah, ice cream, books, and beach. Yeah.
I love
What about you, Jenna?
Ice cream, books, and beach sounds good to me. I'll take that for the win. So yes, actually, what I would be doing, Tammy, you don't know this yet. I told Joan before you hopped on, I would be playing with my brand new, currently 4-week-old English cream golden retriever named Finnegan.
Puppy.
He will be coming to live with me in July. So if I wasn't doing this, I would be playing with Finn.
Congratulations. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
So Minnie and Ruby, or Rosie can have a playmate because we all have now our pups.
Yes, we do.
I'm so excited for you.
And if you take our classes, you hear Rosie, my Havanese bark, and Minnie, Tammy's corgi bark. And not usually at the same time, but they do help us. They're our soundtrack. Rosie, they look like we picked up, so yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on the One Inside podcast. It has been such a treat to be your guest host, and join us again next time for more authors on the Altogether You book.
Yes.
No, Altogether.
Altogether us.
Altogether us.
A lot of Altogether Yous is us. So it's
That's
perfect. Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, like, all the things. My book is available at your favorite independent bookstore or all the places books are available. You can also visit my website, tammysollenberger.com, where you can download a free meditation on getting to know your should parts. You know, there's parts of you who remind you of what you should be doing. They sound a bit critical at times. Yes, we all have them. You can follow me at IFS Tammy on Instagram and Twitter and the One Inside Facebook page. I'm so grateful for Jack Reardon, who created the new music. Jack is a graduate of Derek Scott's IFS Stepping Stone program. Thanks, Jack, for getting me. And to you, thanks for listening.